Welcome everyone. Everybody loves to talk about innovation, especially in the competition world, but rarely do we try to measure innovation, and even less so do we try to measure the weight given to innovation by courts in deciding competition cases. This is precisely what I attempt to do in a working paper that I want to present to you. First, I need to discuss what is and how to perform systematic content analysis, and then to explore with you some of the lessons that I learned out of the process. Before I start, let me say that all of what I will cover in this video is actually more detailed in the working paper that you can access with the QR code that appears right above me. Okay, so systematic content analysis, what it is and how to perform such an analysis. The first thing you need to do is to define the corpus that you will study. Here, I have decided to focus on EU courts, meaning the General Courts and the Court of Justice of the European Union, and then to more specifically analyze all the cases that will explicitly mention innovation. The reason why I have decided to focus just on the court and not on the European Commission is because they have the final say in how we understand competition law. And the reason why I have decided to exclude all the cases that will not mention innovation is precisely because I wanted to study and measure whether courts have a coherent theory of innovation conceived as such, and not just a conception of innovation that may appear when they deal with related markets. That led me eventually to 20 cases. That is already something that I thought was surprising. I was expecting more cases in the field of competition law to mention innovation and assign a role to innovation, whether to define practices or to define the market, all of the parameters that we will study together in this video. Once you have your body of cases, you need to define all the variables that you will document in a systematic manner in all of those cases. Here, I have decided, based on the economic and management literature, to document the following variables. First, I wanted to see if the courts were mentioning innovation made by the defendant, by the plaintiff, or both. Second, I wanted to see if the courts were always focusing on product innovation or if they were also targeting business and processes innovation. Third, I wanted to see if the courts will always study innovation in the short term, meaning using variables that are existing today, or if they were also taking long-term innovation into consideration. When it comes to where, I wanted first to see if the court will focus on digital innovation only, or if they will also target other types of innovation, let's say, for example, in the pharma market. And I wanted to see if innovation was always studied within the scope of the relevant market of the defendants, or if sometimes, in some cases, the court will also try to assess the competitive pressure put by innovation outside of the relevant market. And last, I wanted to assess how courts perceive innovation. Here, the economic literature is giving us a nice framework to study two visions of innovation on competition. The first is called the incentive effect. The idea here is that competition drives innovation. And the second one is called the impact effect, meaning that innovation drives competition. After I completed the coding book, I then was in a position to document all of those variables for all of the 20 cases that I identified. And this is what I want to tackle in the second part of this video. Let me start with what I found when analyzing those 20 cases in indeed a systematic manner. First, some numbers. When it comes to the role assigned to innovation in those competition cases, meaning where is the court analyzing innovation, I see that for 6 of those cases, the court is analyzing whether innovation is changing the way by which we define market power. For 15 of those cases, the court is then using innovation as a theory of harm, meaning that the practice is deemed to infringe competition law because it decreases innovation in the relevant markets. And in 4 of those cases, the courts are analyzing whether increasing innovation could indeed be used to justify a practice and therefore exempt the practice from being prohibited according to competition law. Now, when it comes to who is being concerned, 13 of those 20 cases relate to the defendant, meaning the defendant's capacity and or ability to innovate. 6 of those cases will consider at the same time the defendant and their competitors' ability and or capacity to innovate, and just 1 case will focus just on the competitor ability and or capacity to innovate. When it comes to the type of innovation, you see that just one case is concerned with process innovation, whilst 19 of those 20 cases are concerned with product innovation. Now, where is innovation being studied? You see that there are 15 cases that are non-digital in nature, including 6 pharma cases and 9 cases in other sectors of the industry. 5 of those cases, quite logically, are digital. To my surprise, I found that there are no cases in which the courts analyzed and assessed innovation outside of the relevant market. 20 of those cases are there concerned with what's happening inside the markets, such as defined by the courts. As far as competitive dynamics are concerned, you see that 11 of those 20 cases tackle innovation from an incentive effect perspective, meaning that competition drives innovation in those markets according to the courts. Just one case looks solely at innovation from an impact effect perspective, which some of us may call dynamic competition, and 7 cases look at innovation from both an incentive and impact effect perspective. I also documented whether the courts saw innovation as a way to drive competition or as a way to survive, meaning in a context of a dynamic competition. And then when it comes to short-term versus long-term, you see that 15 cases are concerned with the short-term, and 3 cases are concerned with the short and the long term. There are no cases concerned solely with the long term, and for 2 of those cases, I couldn't actually assess whether or not the court was coming from a short or a long-term perspective. Okay, but enough about numbers. Let me now have a look at some selected findings, something more qualitative. When it comes to the weight given to innovation by EU courts when defining the relevant markets, we see when analyzing cases one after the other that indeed innovation outside of the relevant market is not even mentioned a single time, meaning that most likely this type of competitive pressure is not taken into consideration by EU courts. When it comes to market power, the analysis confirms something that is known to competition law experts. In Hoffmann-La Roche, the court holds that very large market shares are enough to define market power and dominance, but the analysis has changed over the years, and we have now several cases confirming that market shares are not sufficient to actually define a situation in which the company is in a dominant position. If I move on to theory of harm, meaning the practices that may impede on innovation, we see that the principle is pretty stable over the years. Harm to innovation might be anti-competitive, something that has been heavily debated in academic circles over the year. And to prove that there is indeed such a harm, the plaintiff need to show that there is a probable effect of the practice decreasing innovation that is deemed to be sufficient. Now, onto the incentive versus impact effect. Here, I find the case law pretty hard to read and non-convincing. In cases such as Microsoft and Google Shopping, the case didn't look at the impact effect, although it seems that such markets are driven by innovation. And in those cases, the standard of proof is the following. When going for the incentive effect, meaning competition drives innovation, the plaintiff must show that reduced competitive pressure will indeed decrease innovation. The fact cannot simply be assumed to be true. Now, as to the distinction between innovation to drive the market or to survive, I find the case law to be more coherent. The principle is the following: when innovation is considered to be a necessity to survive on the market, the court focuses less on the incentives to innovate because incentives exist already to survive, but they focus then on the barriers to innovate, which I think makes perfect sense. And last, if we look at the justifications that the parties may raise to escape an antitrust sanction, the principle is that improvements to innovation may indeed justify a practice that is reducing competition on the short term, which is something that the parties should be able to show with a sufficient degree of probability. Taking a step back, there are 2 lessons. Lesson number 1, there is no overall theory of innovation in those competition cases. I say that for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, EU courts do not always assess the same parameter, although the cases may be similar in nature. For example, the capacity of competitors to innovate is considered in just 7 cases when it seems to be always relevant when trying to study whether or not a practice will reduce competitive pressure. And 2, EU courts do not always give the same weight to innovation, something that we explored when it comes to market shares. Lesson number 2, when we find little bubbles of coherence, it's incomplete. On the one hand, there are reasons to rejoice. For example, the court will systematically consider several important parameters of innovations, such as barriers to innovate when innovation is indeed a necessity to survive on the market. On the other hand, I cannot praise a situation in which the court is coherent in ignoring systematically some parameters that the economic and management literature is telling us are important. For example, innovation outside of the relevant market is not even mentioned in the case law, disruptive innovation is not analyzed in the case law, and those are the types of analysis that we may want to integrate into our EU competition law. Out of that, I come with some proposals. I've tried my best to summarize those proposals in the following table, and I want to spend just 1 or 2 minutes exploring the table with you. When it comes to market definition, I suggest as a principle always taking innovation into consideration, with of course different weight given to innovation depending on the type of industry. This means, and that is proposal number 2, that economists should help us assessing what is the weight we should indeed give to innovation when defining the relevant market. Proposal number 3, innovation outside of the relevant market, for example, complements as opposed to pure substitute, may create competitive pressure, and that is why I think we should always study whether or not there is such a situation in the case at stake. And proposal number 4, we may want to conduct retrospective studies to study the likelihood of a market being disrupted and to factor in such a possibility. Cluster number 2, market power. First, I suggest creating a framework per industry to balance the importance of market share versus innovation when defining market power. 2, I see no reason why we shouldn't study the ability of competitors to innovate and their incentive to indeed innovate in fast-moving industry and therefore to create competitive pressure on the parties facing the agencies. And proposal number 3, I suggest studying in a systematic manner the ability of the defendant and its competitors to innovate by factoring in some past and current indicators. Cluster number 3, when it comes to market strategies, including merge control. First, I suggest adopting an ecosystem view that systematically considers access to infrastructures, assets, and skills in innovation-driven markets. This will help better anticipating the effect of mergers on competitive pressure. 2, we may want to consolidate the legality test behind the practices that are harming innovation. We find a lack of coherence, which I think is disturbing. And 3, that is the other side of the coin, we want to systematize innovation improvement as a way to justify practices and indeed provide the parties with more legal certainty in the space. Alright, this is all I wanted to cover in this video. Thank you so very much for your time and interest. Again, this presentation is based on a paper that is accessible in the description of this video. Comments are more than welcomed. Up until then, take care of yourself and if you can, someone else too. Bye bye.